Hello everyone, it's Daniel from TechMind Factory and welcome to this new video from the series called Modern Identity powered by Azure. In this video, we are going to talk about magic links with Azure AD B2C. Magic links is one of the options where we want to authenticate user without using the password. Obviously, like every approach, it has its own pros and cons. So let's talk about magic links in this video. Let's talk a little bit about the theory. Magic links are one-time use links sent to the customer during the authentication process. And in this specific scenario, obviously the customer is the user. After entering the username, the user is sent a URL either to the user's email address or in the text message. And it's very important that magic link doesn't have to be sent through the email. It can be also sent through the text message. When a user clicks on the link received, user is automatically authenticated without using the password. This is the magic process, so we have the name called magic links. Now, next question is, how do magic links work? This video is focused on the Azure AD B2C, but I would like you to remember and know that magic links mechanism is standardized. It's not like a typical for Azure AD B2C. It's based on the OpenID Connect and OAuth standards. So you can implement magic links also with any other identity provider, not only with the Azure AD B2C. But obviously, in this video, our focus is Azure AD B2C. So what is the magic link structure? Magic link is the URL which consists of the address of the web application user tries to access. So on the right side, we can see this URL. We can see that there is address of our web application and there is specific endpoint that will handle ID token hint, which we will describe in a minute. And we have this part with ID token hint. So URL contains query parameter called ID token hint, which is a JOT token containing information about the user. So every time we are signing in with magic links, there is this ID token hint embedded with the information about the user. ID token hint must be passed to the identity provider, like Azure AD B2C in this case, so it can be exchanged for the ID token used by the application to authenticate user. So in this specific scenario, as we can see on the right side, there is URL of our application with specific endpoint, obviously, and we have this query parameter, which is the ID token hint. So now, let's talk a little bit more about the ID token hint. When we decode the ID token hint, we can see that it's signed JOT, which contains claims about the user, like email address. So on the left side, you can see the decoded ID token hint, and you can see that it's like typical JOT token, and inside it we have different kinds of claims like email, issuer, and audience. There is also audience of the token, and that's very important. In this case, web application that will receive ID token hint once user opens magic link. And this is very important. In the magic link, we have to set the audience. So who is the receiver of this ID token hint? Who should receive this ID token hint to exchange it for the ID token? Okay, perfect. So let's talk a little bit more about magic links with Azure AD B2C. This is the diagram that shows the flow. So let's start and let's describe it so we are on the same page. So, as always, there is web application and user clicks login button. User is redirected here to the Azure AD B2C authorization endpoint. So user sees the login page. And on the login page, user is selecting authentication with magic links. So in this specific process, user has to provide the email address. Once the email address is provided and user click continue button, Azure AD B2C underneath calls magic links API with user email in the request body. So here we have this component called magic links API. And now here in the Magic Links API on this side, what will happen, we will get the email from the request. We will then create the ID token hint, which will contain the email claim, which will contain other claims and audience, so the client ID of web application that should receive this ID token hint. And obviously we can add more claims if needed. And obviously the good practice is also to check whether user exists or not, because if user does not exist, we don't want to send this magic link. So once the JOT token claims are ready, we have to also sign this ID token hint. We will talk about signing more in this video in a minute, but it has to be signed. And once it's signed, then we are building this magic link URL, which consists of URL of the application and the ID token hint query parameter. And then we are sending this magic link to the user through the email. So for instance, in my solution, I'm using SendGrid service, and I'm sending the magic link in the email to the mailbox of the user. And now what will happen, user opens magic link URL. So user clicks on the URL in the email, and then user is redirected to the web application with the ID token hint query parameter. So now web application received the ID token hint, but this is not the end. Now web application has to exchange this ID token hint for the ID token issued for this specific application. So this web application, what will happen here, this application will call Azure AD B2C to exchange ID token hint for the target ID token for the application. So once Azure AD B2C receives the ID token hint, Azure AD B2C can check the signature using the well-known endpoint, which we will see in a minute. And basically, if this ID token is signed by the Magic Links API and the audience is correct, which is client ID of this web application, Azure AD B2C will create and return ID token for the application so it can authenticate user successfully. And then user is successfully authenticated. Okay, perfect. So now let's talk a little bit more about technical details. Azure AD B2C allows relying party applications to send an inbound JOT as a part of the OAuth 2 authorization request. Yeah. So Azure AD B2C allows relying party applications to send inbound JOT tokens. And this JOT token sent in the authorization request is called ID token hint. So this is like a hint for the Azure AD B2C to discover the identity of the user. Azure AD B2C validates the signature, issuer name, and token audience and extract the claims from the inbound ID token hint. So that's why if we put any additional claims in the ID token hint and we will pass it to the B2C, B2C is able to extract those claims and then include them in the resulting ID token. So ID token hint, Azure AD B2C. The ID token hint must be a valid JOT token. That's the first rule. And the following table lists the claims that are mandatory. Additional claims are optional, obviously. So here, those claims on the left side are mandatory. So the audience of the token, the issuer, expiration time, and not before. So those 4 claims has to be included. All other claims are optional. Okay, perfect. So more technical details. With ID token hint, the token issuer, a relying party or an identity provider, composes the token. So in this specific scenario, it's Magic Links API. So Magic Links API composes the token and then signs it by using a signing key to prove the token comes from a trusted source. The signing key can be symmetric or asymmetric. That's very important. So let's talk about token signing symmetric cryptography. So symmetric cryptography or private key cryptography uses a shared secret to both sign and validate the signature. So we have shared key here to sign the token and to validate the signature of the token. And the HMAC, so hash-based message authentication code with SHA, hashing algorithm, is the most common symmetric algorithm for signed JWT tokens. The hash-based message authentication code output value is basically the signature, so JWS signature. So with this signature, the token can be passed to the identity provider, and then identity provider, using the same private key, the same shared secret, identity provider can check the signature of the token. On the other side, there is asymmetric cryptography. And RSA and ECDSA algorithms are the most common asymmetric algorithms for signed JWT tokens. A party uses its private key to sign a JWT token, and receivers then use the public key of that party to verify the JWT token. The receiving parties cannot create new JWT tokens using the public key of the sender, and that's very important. In the symmetric cryptography, we can validate the token signature, but also we can use this key to sign our token. With asymmetric cryptography here, when we receive the ID token hint, we can only validate the signature using the public key of the issuer, basically. So in this architecture, we have Azure AD B2C, we have Magic Links API. Magic Links API uses its private key to sign JWT token, and this Magic Links API also publishes the endpoint where Azure AD B2C can check the public key and can use this public key to check the signature, whether this specific JWT token was really signed by the Magic Links API, basically. The advantage of using those two algorithms over symmetric keys is that anyone can verify the signature without them having to obtain a secret key. That's very important. So the private key, the secret, is always stored on the Magic Links API side in this architecture, and public key is used to check the signature of the ID token hint. But private key is never shared, never published. Okay, so let's talk about the approach with for the token with a symmetric key here. So first of all, we have to create a shared key. And this is basically the PowerShell script that you can use to create such shared key. And it's available in the Azure AD B2C documentation. Once shared key is created, we have to add the signing key to the Azure AD B2C. So in this specific case, under policy keys, we have to add this ID token hint key. And once we have it in the ID token hint extract claims technical profile responsible for extracting claims from the ID token hint, we have to use this ID token hint key. So as we can see under the cryptography keys, we have client secret and we have this reference to the ID token hint key. So in this specific case, once Azure AD B2C receives the ID token hint, it uses the ID token hint key to verify the signature, and also it uses the ID token hint extract claims technical profile to extract claims from this ID token hint. Okay, on the other side, we have token with asymmetric key approach. So first of all, we have to prepare a certificate. Azure Key Vault can be used to generate self-signed certificate in this case. So we can use Azure Key Vault to generate such self-signed certificate, and we can then use this certificate with our Magic Links API. So in the step 2, we have to prepare web application. This application hosts an OpenID Connect metadata endpoint and JSON Web Keys endpoint that is used by Azure AD B2C to validate the signature of the ID token. So the step 2 here is nothing else than, like preparing the Magic Links API. So Magic Links API should expose those two endpoints to get the JSON web keys, and also it should provide the endpoint for OpenID Connect metadata, so well-known endpoint. And now inside the Azure AD B2C, again we have this ID token hint extract claims technical profile, but as you can see we do not use any shared key here, because it's asymmetric key. So the only thing we have to provide here is metadata endpoint. So as you can see, there is well-known OpenID configuration endpoint, and this endpoint should be exposed by Magic Links API. And also we have to validate the audience and the issuer here, as you can see. And it's basically the issuer is optional, but I always recommend doing this. So ID token, audience and issuer, those should be included here, and we will see it in my custom policy example. So what will happen here, once Azure AD B2C receives the ID token hint, Azure AD B2C will call the metadata endpoint of Magic Links API to check the public key and check the signature of the ID token hint. So then Azure AD B2C can be sure that this specific ID token hint was created and signed by the Magic Links API. Yeah, so in this case, as we can see, there is always this connection between Azure AD B2C and our Magic Links API or web application. It depends on your architecture. Perfect. So now let's talk a little bit more about Magic Links best practices. First of all, it's good practice to provide one-time use links. So once Magic Link was used, it cannot be used again. Another practice is to add multi-factor authentication. So where we do this exchange for ID token by providing ID token hint to the Azure AD B2C, for instance, we can also require MFA. And once a user, let's say, provides the code from the authenticator app, then user is successfully authenticated and web application will receive ID token. Set expiration dates for links. Yes, so it's very important to set the expiration date for the ID token hint. So it shouldn't be available for usage all the time. There should be a strict time set for the usage, like 15 minutes, let's say. Always verify ID token hint issuer. So this is what we were talking about. Yes, every time our Azure AD B2C or any identity provider receives ID token hint, we should then check the issuer and check the signature of the token. Keep Magic Links email subject and content concise. So when you use email to send the Magic Links, keep it concise and keep the email subject concise, so user clearly knows that this is about Magic Links authentication. Perfect. So now it's time to see Magic Links in action. Let's start with Magic Links API. So here is my Magic Links API written with ASP.NET Core. And as you can see under certificates folder, I have this self-signed certificate generated with Azure Key Vault. And this is good for the demo purpose, but obviously for the production workloads, you should use your certificate from the certificate authority. Yeah. So in this case, it shouldn't be self-signed certificate. Okay, then what is important here is the fact that I'm loading this certificate using this code in the program.cs file. So I'm loading this because I will use this certificate to sign ID token hint. So here I have this add signing credential method, extension method, and please see that inside this method I'm checking whether this certificate has the private key, and also I'm adding it to be used basically in my ASP.NET Core Web API. Yes, and I'm checking the algorithm here, whether it's asymmetric algorithm and so on. Once it's loaded, then we can start building the Magic Links. So what will happen here, under controller, I have this Magic Links controller, and this controller provides basically three endpoints. Well-known OpenID configuration, well-known OpenID configuration JWKS to provide the keys, and also API magic links send to send the magic link to the user. And now, if I will open the Swagger, so open API definition here, you can see that if I will click this well-known endpoint, here is the information about the issuer, authorization endpoint, token endpoint, and so on. So this is like a standard well-known endpoint defined by OpenID Connect. And obviously here I have this endpoint for the keys. So when I will use it, you can see that here is the information about the algorithm, so RSA. And this endpoint is used by the Azure AD B2C to check the signature for the ID token hint. And there is the third endpoint which we can use to send the magic link to the user, which will take email as a parameter, but this will be executed or called from the Azure AD B2C. So now, if we get back to our magic links API, you can see that here I have this ID token hint builder. So inside this class, basically, what I'm doing, I'm building the ID token hint. So here I have to get all the parameters required to mint this ID token hint, to build it. So as you can see, here is the audience, here is the issuer, and obviously it's extracted from the application configuration. Here are the claims that will be included in the token. So only one claim for the demo purpose will be included, so email. And then, as you can see here, I have this signing credential. So basically I'm using this certificate for magic links here to sign this ID token hint. So in this part, I'm creating JOT security token, yeah? And then I'm writing this token. So basically here the token is minted and is returned from the build ID token method. So now in the token signing certificate, I want to show you that really quickly. As you can see here, I'm getting the signing credential. So I'm extracting this certificate that I loaded, and obviously it's on the local host, but also you can implement this to get the certificate from the Azure Key Vault. It's below here. But the most important part is that you have to extract this certificate and use it in your application. Okay, so now when I will open, let me open this user magic links invitation. Yeah. So what is happening in this user magic link invitation handler? So here I'm sending the magic link. So what will happen here? I'm building the ID token hint. So using build ID token method. Then I'm adding the redirect URL. So in this specific case, we have to add this redirect URL to make sure that the process of exchanging the tokens will work properly. And then I'm building the email content with magic link. Yeah. So here I'm passing the email, so to which user this should be sent, and also the magic link login URL. And obviously underneath here in this process, there is also additional check whether user exists or not in the Azure AD B2C using Microsoft Graph API. So in the end, using mail delivery service, I'm able to send the magic link to the user. So this is about the magic links API. So now let me show you the custom policy here. As you remember, I mentioned about ID token hint, extract claims, technical profile. Yeah. And basically inside this technical profile, as you can see, I have this metadata endpoint set. And this is the endpoint of my Magic Links API. This is the OpenID configuration I showed you just in a minute using the Swagger UI. There is ID token audience. So this is the client ID of my web application registered in the Azure AD B2C that will receive the ID token hint and will exchange it for the ID token. And also the issuer. So in this case, it's just the URL of my Magic Links API on the local host, but obviously you can adjust the name of the issuer. It doesn't have to be like this using the ngrok. And here the output claim is email. So we want to extract the user email here. Yeah. And also please note that here, once we will extract this email, then we on the B2C side, we can also do this additional check whether user exists. So we can use user read using email address, technical profile, and basically we will raise this. We can raise this error if user does not exist. So it can be changed here. So raise error if claims principal does not exist. It can be set to true. So it's optional. You can do this check on the API side. You can do this check on Azure AD B2C side, or both. One more thing. Technical profile responsible for calling Magic Links API with the email as a request body. So here, as you can see, I have this REST send Magic Link technical profile. Again, the service URL is the Magic Links API URL, and we are calling Magic Links send endpoint. And obviously in the body, we have to send the email address. And once it's sent, we will display information to the user that Magic Link was successfully sent. Perfect. So now let's see the login page of the Azure AD B2C. Here is the login page of my Azure AD B2C tenant, and from there I will click Magic Link Authentication. On this page, I will have to provide my email address and click Continue button. Once it's done, we can see the confirmation. A link to sign in has been sent to your inbox. So now let's see this message. Here is the message I received. Click the link to complete sign-in process. So once I will click sign in button, I will be redirected to web application. But before I will do it, let's see the content of this token. As we can see, here is the email that I used to authenticate, and there is also the issuer. So in this case, it's ngrok URL. As I mentioned, it's the demo, and there is audience, so the client ID of my web application. And obviously, this ID token hint is signed by the certificate used in our Magic Links API. Perfect. So now let's see what will happen on the web application side. Here is my demo web application, and as you can see, here I can click login button to authenticate, but I will not do it. Instead, I will use Magic Link to authenticate without the password. So here in another tab, as you can see, I have the Magic Link URL here. And there is the URL of my application here on the local host. And as you can see, there is ID token hint parameter. So now, when I will go to this link, we can see that there was quick redirection to the Azure AD B2C, and then I'm redirected to the application. And there I'm successfully authenticated, and we can see this information. Hello, Daniel. So I authenticated using Magic Link instead of using password. So now let's see what is happening on the source code side. Here is the demo application in the Visual Studio Code, and this is Blazor server application. Let's check program.cs file. In this application, I'm using Microsoft Identity Web library, so dedicated library from Microsoft to integrate applications with Azure AD and Azure AD B2C. And as we can see under Add Microsoft Identity Web App, here I have on redirect to identity provider event. So here, what I can do, I can attach ID token hint. So basically every time there is redirection to the Azure AD B2C, an ID token hint parameter exists on the application side, add this ID token hint in the request to authorization endpoint of the Azure AD B2C. So, under controllers also, I have this Magic Links controller. And we can see that there is this one endpoint, sign in OIDC link. And basically, this endpoint is responsible for extracting ID token hint from the query. So, when we are executing the Magic Link URL, basically what will happen, we will be redirected to this web application, and this endpoint will be called sign in OIDC link. And what we will do here, we will extract ID token hint from the query parameter, and we will attach it to the Magic Link authentication properties. So basically to authentication properties. So that's why when we will do this redirection to the Azure AD B2C, ID token hint will be passed. So here, this ID token hint will be included in the request to the authorization endpoint. Perfect. So this is it about the magic links with Azure AD B2C. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next videos. Thank you for watching.